wasting people's time for half a decade. 2. The negative claims that embargo was made for a reason. 3. The negative team does not present any evidence saying that it is not being wasted. 4. I will give even more evidence saying that the embargo harms the people of Cuba and not the government as intended. Juan Magan, Mexican ambassador, Procon.org, nonprofit organization, to the United States maintains an embargo against Cuba, June 25, 2013. Cubans are denied access to technology, medicine, affordable food, and other goods that could be available to them if the United States lifted the embargo. A report by the American Association for World Health found that doctors in Cuba have access to less than 50% of the drugs on the world market, and that food shortages led to a 33% drop in the caloric intake between 1989 and 1993. The report stated, "It is our expert medical opinion that the United States embargo has caused a significant rise in sufferings and even deaths in Cuba." Amnesty International reported in 2011 that treatments for children and young people with bone cancer and antiretroviral drugs used to treat children with HIV and AIDS were not readily available with the embargo in place because they were commercialized under the U.S. patents. What this is saying, dear judge, is not only have the embargo wasted people for half a decade, which is a lifetime, but also that it is denying Cubans from basic staples, from basic things in life and necessities such as food and medical and medicaments and drugs. And so I would like to say, do we really want to keep the Cuban people oppressed? I do not think so. Therefore, therefore the significance votes affirmative. Moving on to Roman numeral number 2, harms A. I would like to say that 1, the affirmative stated that the Cuban people do not have liberty. 2, the negative team dropped this point, meaning they cannot refer back to it in this whole round, meaning that the affirmative team automatically wins this point. And 3, I would like to just pull the argument saying that Cuban people do not have liberty, and the negative team just agreed with it by dropping the point. Moving on to Roman numeral number 2, harms B. 1, the affirmative stated that the lack of agricultural resources are needed for catastrophes and food shortages. 2, again, the negative team failed to refute this argument, meaning that they dropped it. 3, I would like to pull the argument and say that the affirmative team automatically wins this because it was dropped. 5, I would like to remind you, Judge, that the negative team cannot bring this up and say we did not drop because they explicitly said in the cross-X that yes, we did not answer it. Moving on to Roman numeral number C, letter C, Cuba's unique medical and ecological resources are wasted. 1, the negative state that environmental protection is one more reason we should not lift the embargo. 2, this is not correct because Cuba will be home to one of the most protected environments in the world if the embargo is lifted. Loveburn, winner of the American Association for Advancements of Science Journalism Award 2006. Though Cuba is economically destitute, it has the richest biodiversity in the Caribbean. Cuba remains largely undeveloped, with large tracts of untouched rainforests and unspoiled reefs. The country has signed numerous international conservation treaties and set aside vast areas of land for government protection. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Cuba has to rely mostly on limited resources. It has embraced organic farming and low-energy agriculture because it cannot afford to do anything else. What this is saying, Judge, is that by lifting the embargo, the affirmative team will protect one of the most valuable ecological resources and agricultural resources from Cuba. And so this vote also votes affirmative because we pointed out 2 pieces of evidence and they only had 1, and 2 minus 1 is 1 for the affirmative team. Moving on to Roman numeral number 3, inherency A. The majority of Republicans do not like this plan. This is a very bad barrier because and the negative team also dropped this point and they agreed in cross-X that did not refer to it or answer it, meaning they cannot bring it up in the whole entire round and this point automatically flows affirmative. So I'm not going to take much time to spend on that because the negative team basically agreed with our case. Moving on to Roman numeral number 5, solvency A. Negative states that 1, lifting will strengthen the government. And the affirmative say that 2, lifting the embargo, not the isolation of an embargo, can promote democracy in Cuba. Juan Magan, Mexican ambassador, Procon.org, nonprofit organization, the United States maintains embargo against Cuba, June 25, 2013. Former Illinois government, George Ryan R. said, "I think we ought to treat Cuba like we do any other country in the world. Our biggest commodity is democracy, and we ought to be spreading that in any place we can. And what makes this country great is free trade. An influx of U.S. tourists and businesses would expose the sheltered island to our culture and freedoms, and weaken Castro's regime, control over information coming into the country. Trading with China led to economic reforms that brought 100 million people above the poverty line and improved access to healthcare and education across the country. What this piece of evidence judge says is that, one, by lifting the embargo, it will weaken Castro's regime and therefore will not strengthen it as the negative stated. And two, there's also already an example in the past that when China opened its trade, 100 million people rise over poverty. And the same will happen with Cuba. If we would just lift the embargo, we would eliminate poverty in Cuba. And this is a very good cause, and we are solid for this. Moving on to B. They said that lifting embargo does not do anything, and we took their evidence to examine it. However, one, they failed to refute the argument saying that that lifting the embargo will reveal needed agricultural resources. And two, there is no mention of agricultural resources in their evidence. And Judge, I would like you to require this piece of evidence to look before you judge and see if there is anything talking about agricultural resources before you make a decision. So four, this is irrelevant to the debate, and we pull on our argument saying that much needed agricultural resources will be revealed by lifting the embargo. So going to C, they said that it will destroy the biodiversity, which is a very similar point in the harm C. And again, I'll give the same piece of evidence as I gave a while ago for harm C. I said that it will be, if the embargo is lifted, the Americans will have reservists because they have better science and better technology. And so, Judge, as we end this round, I would like to say, do you really want Cuban people being oppressed? Do you really want the negative team to ruin it for the whole population? If not, please vote affirmative, because we want the best for Cuban people and the American economy. And thank you.
Thus meaning that the negative team agrees with us, saying that America and its embargo has been wasting the Cuban people's time. By wasting the Cuban people's time, I think the affirmative team should win based on just this point, because we need to lift the embargo and stop wasting people's time, because I hate it when someone wastes my time. And I think everyone in this room hates it when people waste their time. Time is valuable. Moving on to harms A and B. Harms A and B were both granted, and by granting harms A and B, they agreed that the status quo is flawed and we need to do something about it. Moving on to harm C. First of all, they say, before I start arguing about harm C, Judge, I'd like to argue one thing in general. In their rebuttals, we should not be allowed to bring up new arguments. What the negative team has been doing throughout their previous speeches is bringing up new arguments. New arguments are not fair to the affirmative team because we do not have enough time to be preparing for this in our 5-minute speeches, and they should not be allowed in the rebuttal. The debate is about education. Since this isn't fair, I don't think you should take this into consideration. Moving on to harm C. They say we have older evidence and they have newer evidence. First of all, older evidence doesn't mean better or worse evidence. Our qualifications came from a winner of the American Association of Advanced Science. Second of all, I would like to say that this is a new argument, and this should not be taken into consideration. Also, you do not refute the initial argument that the Cuban embargo is making people lack some agricultural resources and medical resources. Moving on to inherency, they granted the inherency, meaning that they agreed that the Republicans don't want to do the plan. Moving on to solvency A, they say first of all we should not lift the embargo because it violates human rights. The negative team also says that affirmative talks about free trade. First of all, I'd like to say that this is all new argument, and by being a new argument to the rebuttal, Judge, you should not be taking this into consideration. Second of all, they do not refute the initial argument that says that lifting the embargo. They do not refute the argument that we made before that lifting the embargo helps people obtain justice. Also, this is a non-unique argument. This is my last argument against solvency A. This is a non-unique argument because in their evidence, they clearly state that human rights abuses are occurring now. And since they are occurring now, the affirmative team is going to do nothing different to make human rights worse. Moving on to solvency B, I believe the negative team dropped that, and by dropping our solvency B, they agree with it, or they just agree with it. Moving on to solvency C, first of all, they say that our response does not match their point. Well, I'd like to say, Judge, our response clearly matches the point because we clearly stated that the environment is going to be protected by lifting the embargo. They also don't refute our argument because they only say that our argument doesn't match. Wow, that got really weird really quick. I'm sorry. I'm just going to move on, Judge. Moving on to the disads. The first disad, they say that lifting the embargo costs money. First of all, I would like to say that in their whole evidence that they read in that disad, it does not match the tag because nowhere in the evidence does it say that lifting the embargo will cost such and such amount of money. And also, in our plan, we clearly state that we will be using no money money to lift the embargo. Moving on to their second dissent, they first say that the United States is poor, and second say the United States cannot afford any spending. Well, they say I would like to argue this dissent in a whole. First of all, American tourism, no, excuse me. Um, First of all, the American economy is recovering and the United States is becoming better. And Chief Economist, USnews.com, 2014 was looking good for the United States, January 15th, 2014. This was just a couple of days ago, Judge. The United States economy appears posed at its best performance since the depths of recession in 2008-2009. After 4 years of modest recovery, the economy has largely mended from injuries received during the financial panic. Here are the top 5 reasons why the U.S. in 2014 may post 2.5% real GDP growth or better. This clearly shows how the United States economy is becoming better, and we are not poor. Moving on to their second dissent. Before I move on to the second dissent, I'd like to say that I have refuted the whole dissent in a whole, as a whole, and you should not take it into consideration because the United States isn't poor, and that takes down their link, and so they have pretty much no impact. Moving on to the second dissent that says that U.S. tourism is bad. Well, let's argue this as a whole. First of all, tourism does not harm the United States economy or Cuban economy. Doug Bandos, senior fellow at the Cato Institute, former special assistant to former U.S. President Ronald Reagan. Time to end the Cuban embargo. December 11, 2013. More U.S. contacts would have an impact. American tourists would boost the earnings of Cubans who rent rooms, drive taxis, sell or operate restaurants of their own. Those dollars would then find their way to hundreds of freely priced farmers, carpenters or airmen, tutors, food vendors, and other interpreters, thus boosting the Cuban economy. In conclusion, I have just refuted the second dissent as well, the first dissent, and their freely roaming argument that says lifting the embargo costs money. So thank you, Judge, for listening to my speech. Thank you for listening to the affirmative team's speech, but clearly the affirmative team has the better arguments here in the presentation.
Significance was granted, harms A and B was granted, and harm C, they said that we're making new arguments that our data is new. We're making new arguments, but we're showing why our evidence is better than theirs. So we should win on harm C because we have newer evidence, and 2 years difference, and a lot can happen in 2 years. So let's go to inherency was granted, and solvency. It said they said that they're gonna protect the environment, but you can't they didn't show how they're gonna protect it. Plus they can't protect they can't just show every tourist, since it's gonna double the tourists as well. They can't like tell each, they can't guarantee that they won't they can protect the economy, protect the environment of Cuba. So we should win because they didn't show how they can protect it, and it's not logical telling Americans to do this and that, they won't listen, or some will listen, maybe some won't. So we should win on solvency as well. Now going back to the dissents, they said that my tag didn't have anything to do with it. Well, I'll read the last 5 words. It says it's worth political So we should, and then they kind of argued, they kind of agreed with us that the economy is rising up, which means it was poor from before, but they didn't show how high it rose. So they didn't show if they could still pay for, they didn't give evidence that if they can pay for the, invest invest in the, in letting the embargo, uh, letting the embargo, lifted. Plus, they didn't argue about my sex tourism argument, so we would win on that because they dropped that argument, which means that sex tourism will happen, and a lot of innocent little children get raped in Cuba, and we're just gonna add more people to rape the Cuban population. So don't so we should win on this argument. Plus, their environment is their environmental arguments that they said it's not going to harm the environment is not logical. See, when you're in a poor economy and you just send people there, you're going to send like twice as much as it can handle. There won't be any hotels for the tourists first of all. Second of all, they'll like, it's like taking over Cuba instead of helping Cuba and providing for the environment. So Judge, we should win based on disadvantage. They don't have enough money to, they don't have money to lift the embargo. Plus, they need money to lift the embargo. It can't just happen like that for free. And let's not have little children get raped.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank my partner for doing this very hard work. I'd like to thank your friend of the team and congratulate them for making it to the finals. And I would like to tell them that we're very proud of them. Once again, I'd like to thank the two judges and the timekeeper. Moving on to the case side, I would like to say, first off, the affirmative team is totally against rape. And we will not make little children get raped. And I'll get more into that in the disadvantage. And so we are moving on to Roman rule number 1, significance A. They granted that. Roman 2 harms A and B were also granted. So these are 3 points that are granted, showing that there is something wrong with the status quo, which is the current time, and we need to do something to solve it. So we automatically win the point because they granted. Moving on to C. They said their evidence is better because it is newer. But judge, if my sister, my little sister who's 10, says something today, and Obama said something 2 years ago, will my sister be more right than Obama? I doubt that seriously. Qualifications matter the most, and we have a winner of the Association of Advanced Science, which is more qualified than anyone to talk about this subject. Moving on to 3, inherency, which was granted by the negative team, meaning the affirmative team automatically wins point, so I will not talk about it so much. Moving on to solvency, they said A, but they meant C because they talked about the environment, and that's our point C. So I'll just address it as C. And I would like to say that we gave 2 pieces of evidence showing that we will protect the environment and the Americans will help preserve it. And this is a new argument saying that we cannot protect the environment and the economy because it has never been brought up to around, and this should not be considered by the judge. Not to mention the fact that the affirmative team gave concrete evidence in 2 pieces, while there was a lack of evidence presented by the negative team. So judge, this is policy debate and evidence rules, so you should just give this point to the affirmative team, as long with the whole case. Moving on to B and A, I don't think they were addressed. I think they were both dropped. But if they were addressed, I would like to say that we, as the affirmative team, will reveal much needed agricultural resources and medical and ecological resources that the United States needs and Cuba needs and will benefit both the country. So we're solving for everything in our arms. Moving on to the disadvantages. 1, as I said, The affirmative team is totally against rape, and I don't know how the negative team came to the conclusion that the affirmative team will lead to rape. Moving on, I would like to say that they said that for the first TA that we have to invest and we don't have the money to pay. One, I would like to say that my partner said that Cuba would love nothing more than to be interacting with the United States, and it's just the United States that is blocking the Cuba by the embargo. And two, I would like to say that we don't have to invest because as our plan says, it is cost-free. And the affirmative team have their plan, and the negative team cannot tell us what to put in our plan because the plan says it will be cost-free, Cuba-free program. Moving on to the second, they said we dropped sex tourism. No, my partner didn't. He just took out the first point, which will make a chain reaction and take out the consecutive points, saying that tourists doubling the number of tourists will not automatically lead to sex tourism. Not to mention the fact that the negative team agreed sex tourism is already happening. So why is this the affirmative team's fault? We have not caused this. Why is this against us? Leading to the conclusion that the affirmative team won this whole debate. And then the negative team said something about there are no hotels for tourists and we will be taking over Cuba. I would like to say these are new arguments and I don't see how they're relevant to this round. And at the end, I would like to say, Judge, please consider the fact that the affirmative team is here for a noble cause. We are here to stop oppressing Cuban people. We are here to improve the United States economy. We are here to improve the United States and Cuba as two independent